What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. This is Hawk Talk on Melrose. I am Collin, joined as always, Tyler, up in good old Waterloo, Iowa. What's going on, man? How is your Wednesday going? We're almost done with the week, and it feels weird only doing like one episode a week now. Back to
Yeah.
doing that instead of two.
Yeah. And honestly, I feel like it's weird. It makes like the weeks go by slower because it's like one less thing to like look forward to. Because
Yep.
obviously, I love hopping on here and talking Iowa football. So, but it is crazy because it is like December 13th already. We're like less than, or we're pretty much like, what is it? A little over a week and a half away from Christmas. So it's time is flying by. That's for sure.
And we're getting closer to the Citrus Bowl. I mean, that's about
Yeah.
2 weeks, or 2.5 weeks away. So what we're going to do on this episode today is we're really just going to talk a little bit about the transfer portal with Iowa, kind of the roster breakdown with some of the guys that could come back. We're going to get into the OC and, just some rumors flying around there, and then end with the practice film that we have all seen by Deontay Vines and Joe Labus, kind of what our thoughts on that. So, and then maybe real quick at the end, I kind of just, no, we'll save that for a different one. I was going to say we might talk a little just Iowa basketball and how just really bad they are.
Yeah.
That's going to be a very negative segment. So I don't know if we will or not, but might bring it up towards the end. Who knows? But, yeah, let's get right into it. Let's start with kind of the transfer portal. For Iowa, it really seems like this year so far compared to last year, it's been a pretty quiet week. Last year right away we got Cade. That was kind of like the big dynamite, and then it kind of just flowed into some other guys coming in. And this year so far we have not got anybody, but I think, to my knowledge, from what I've heard, is I think there's a strong possibility that a lot of the guys that we want back that could go, that could go to the NFL or that are seniors that could just be done, are considering to stay. And I think, obviously, in my opinion, that's better off with that than going out and getting portal players. Like if you told me right now that,
Yeah.
Jay Higgins, Sebastian Castro, some of those guys would stay, I would take that over going out and getting a bunch of transfers because we know what those players are capable of. They've been inside the program. I do think, though, Iowa will still get some transfers. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I just think right now they're playing the game of, we're going to kind of see some of these guys that we want hopefully to stay. We want to get that all situated, and then we'll go from the transfer portal, because I think a lot of people forget that the transfer portal opens back up after spring ball, and that's when we got Caleb Brown last year. So I still think we're going to get one or two offensive players. I think we're going to get a few defensive players. I do think that, but I just think right now it's a little bit different than last year, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah. As you mentioned, Colin, the initial transfer portal opens up here like this month, and it just opened up, what was it, like a week ago, or maybe even less than that.
Yeah, last
So
Monday.
it's just a crazy time. And I think as Iowa fans, and maybe me just personally speaking, it's like, oh my gosh, I want to know, like, I'm just eager to see, like, are we going to get anybody? Who are we targeting? What positions are we actually looking at? Along with, like you'd mentioned, like the offensive coordinator position as well, which we'll get into. So it's me being greedy, and to be honest with you, I think the way Kirk does things is he takes things one step at a time, and I think he's obviously more concerned right now with just leading up to the bowl game. He's doing, they're doing a lot of behind the scenes work with like the transfer portal and stuff like that, but just worrying about the actual bowl game, and then, like you said, letting those players decide whether or not they want to come back. Because, like you said, that if we can just refill the same holes with a lot of good players that we already have, I mean, that takes care of a lot of the transfer portal needs, if you will, for the team. So, yeah, I don't know. It's weird because it's like, man, I want to get some people, but at the same time, I definitely understand like waiting to see if some of those guys would come back.
Yeah, and a lot of people think, like, when you think of the transfer portal, you think of just guys that you're bringing in, but people forget that you also, like, another aspect of it is keeping players, like maintaining players that could easily leave. And for example, like the running back situation, right? I thought for sure one of the running backs would leave after this year because it's just, I mean, it's a three rotational, a lot, you're not going to be the main guy. I thought for sure either Caleb Johnson, LaShawn Williams, or Jazz would leave. And so far, from the sounds of it, all three are staying. That's a win. That's like almost like, to me, that's almost like gaining someone from the transfer portal. Like you can keep all three guys. So for me so far, like the four guys that have left are four guys where I'm not too concerned about. Now, Deontay Vines, yes, having that extra wide receiver, but I've been saying it the last couple of months. Like I have not really been that impressed with Deontay Vines. Now, one thing is he can never stay healthy, so that might be sort of the reason. But like I just never really seen much from him. Now, yes, did we underutilize him maybe to a certain extent? Yeah, we probably did, but I never really saw anything out of him that was like, oh my gosh, like I'm going to miss the hell out of him. No, disrespect to him, but that's just my personal opinion. Joe Labus, which was, that was 100% going to be like, we knew that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And then on the defensive side, Brendan Diaz-Fernandez, a special teams player, never saw the field, was never going to lick the field. So like, he's gone, not a big miss. And then the one that like I was actually kind of surprised by was Antonio Thompson, the defensive line. He had those two block punts in special teams kind of, and I really thought like he was going to be that next guy. Now he was never going to start like next year, for example, but I thought he was going to be a key rotational piece on the next year's defensive line. So seeing him leave was a little surprising. And then we also had the other defensive lineman that was also with him at Iowa Western. I forgot what his name was. But other than that, we've had 5 or 6 transfers, and they've all been pretty, like, all of them, like, not too big of a deal. And so that's, in my opinion, so far a win. I'd rather get nobody. Now, I want people, but I'd rather get nobody and keep majority of our guys than lose a bunch of guys that, like, I really don't want them to leave and bring in, some random dudes that you really don't know if they will actually do good at Iowa or not. So that's just kind of my opinion on that.
Yeah, I think so far the guy, I agree with you. I'd rather have it where we're having guys transfer because they're not getting enough playing time rather than, for a variety of other reasons. Like, we have actual starting running backs leaving because, this run game hasn't been good, yada, yada, yada. Them actually maybe blaming, the offense. And we haven't seen any of that. Yeah. So that to me is like what I'm most happy for, I guess, is like you said, it's a lot of backups and it's a lot of guys that really just haven't seen the field or haven't, maybe like you said, that the Thompson guy, he had a few key moments, but we're so deep at the D line. I think he just probably wants to find a place where he could try to compete for a starting job. And I just feel like, right now at Iowa, it's pretty tough to do that. So
I think also another problem that I've been seeing a lot too is we're very limited on scholarship opportunities because of some of these guys that could possibly leave that might elect to stay. Well, that scholarship, that you can't, that are kind of taken away. So I've heard that that's another problem that Iowa's facing right now is the lack of scholarships because we've really haven't lost that many players. And if we keep some of these players that they think will stay, that's another problem. But offensively, let's look at the offense of just in general. I do think though, my wish list would be at least 1 or 2 more wide receivers, specifically an X position wide receiver, a guy that can stretch the field, 6'2", 6'3", because we lack that right now. We really don't have anybody, and I think it would be a good second piece to Caleb Brown. With him staying, he's the main guy, but it would be nice to have bringing in somebody that is just another threat. At tight end, my wish list at that position is either keep Luke Lachey or Eric All. One of the two. Sounds like Eric All is probably going to leave, but it really sounds like Luke Lachey is going to stay for another year, which would be huge. You talk about an OC coming in. That's your dream tight end right there, NFL caliber tight end. Offensive line, Rusty Feth leaves. For me, like, I think the offensive line in general grew this year. It still is not where it needs to be at. It needs to take that next step, but compared to last year, it has definitely taken that next step. It's definitely better, but it could be a lot better. So for me, it's like a lot of these guys are coming back. The only one that's really leaving, like I said, is Rusty Feth. But I would still maybe like to get maybe one more transfer. It'd be nice getting like an offensive tackle, for example, like a really good offensive tackle from somewhere. because then you could potentially move Mason Richmond inside, or you can just have Mason Richmond right tackle and then whoever the transfer is left tackle. It'd just be nice having it that way, because that's one thing, like that's one kind of area, like the tackle position for me is that I'm always kind of concerned by for Iowa. So I wouldn't mind that. But other than that, like, and we're just talking offense right now, we'll get to defense, but other than that for offensively, like just a few players that I wouldn't mind getting. And like I said, if Luke Lachey can stay, which like I said, really sounds like he will, like that is a win. You talk at the running backs, they're all coming back. Kincaid stay healthy. Now for me, I really hope, because I don't want another year of Deacon Hill. I mean, I think it's been proven the experiment is over. He's not a good quarterback. We need to be able to find a second string guy that is capable, because who knows if Cade's going to be able to last an entire year. At this point, he's made of glass. Like, he could break at any moment. And so having a backup that is capable, obviously we've seen Deacon Hill is capable of doing it, but he's just not very good at it. We need to find someone that is better, because you just never know when that day will come where Cade gets hurt again. And I hope that doesn't happen. I hope he can play the entire year next year. Be so nice. But if he can get healthy and stay healthy, that's huge.
Yeah, I don't really disagree with anything you just said there, Colin. You kind of hit on all the key pieces that I think we, could use come next year. The big thing that you just mentioned is Cade McNamara's health. Like, as much as I want to believe that he's gonna be the starter for 12 plus games next year, it's hard for me to believe that. I haven't seen him healthy in a while, a long time actually. He's coming off a second ACL injury. I mean, you're exactly right. I think if it takes 1 to 2 offensive linemen in the transfer portal to kind of have them gel, then I'm all for it. Getting the offensive line straightened out and figured out is the number one thing for me. That's where it starts. Yeah. Doesn't matter what offensive coordinator comes in. It starts Iowa football. It starts at the offensive and defensive line, right? The trenches, and we got to get that figured out on the offensive side of the ball. So whether it's another year of growing and meshing, like you said, and continuing to develop, or adding 1 to 2 pieces, that we gotta figure that out for sure. And then go ahead.
Well, the only thing I'm not, compared to last year at this time, I was very concerned about the offensive line, because we just witnessed a horrible year. This year, I'm a little bit feeling a little bit better, because a lot of these guys that are coming back did take that next step from last year to this year. And you would imagine that they would take an even bigger step this year going into next year, because like I said, pretty much all of them are back. So I'm still a little bit concerned about the offensive line, because that's Iowa's bread and butter. You need to be good at the offensive line, but compared to last year, I'm not as worried about the O-line, for me anyway.
Yeah. I think it's more, like I said, I think for me, it's more just Cade's injury history. I want him to be as protected as possible. And if that means we have to figure, something out, then I'm all for it. And just depth at that position. I mean, offensive linemen get hurt all the time. We've talked about it with Iowa football. Some of these guys have not stayed healthy either, right? And so we need to be, that's a position group that I think needs, if we can be a little deeper at, I'm all for that. And then, you said it perfectly, a backup QB position. You see it around the country, not only in college football, but you see it in the NFL right now. Look how many backup quarterbacks are starting right now. And
it's crazy
how important it is to have a guy that can at least manage a game or two or half a season, or, like in Iowa's case last year, and just someone competent at that position that not only knows the system, but just can actually throw the ball around and be kind of accurate. And I'm not asking to be, the best, because otherwise he would start, but just have someone that you can actually trust back there, and that can actually operate and be a game manager. I mean, I think that's big, because Deacon Hill, it ain't it. So he's had some games where I'm just like, man, how are you starting? So we got to get that figured out. I think you're exactly right. I think if we could somehow get a guy to come in, I'd be all for that as well.
Going to one more thing before we switch to defense, with the wide receivers, I kind of started at that point, and I wrote down a list of wide receivers, and like you have Caleb Brown, Seth Anderson, and then after that, it's a bunch of guys that are kind of no-name guys. Who knows if they'll ever be good, but just bunch of no-names, and that's where it's like I really hope we can land at least one more transfer at the wide receiver position. That is someone that is at least has, and not just someone very random. Like I want someone that actually is a sort of proven, because it's Jacob Bostic, Alec Wick, Jarrett Bowie, Dayton Howard, Alex Moda. I mean, a bunch of young guys that maybe one of those guys will step up, but you never know. So like I want to know. I want to make sure that we are good there. Now, obviously, yes, like Luke Lachey comes back and stays healthy. Addison Ostrenga, some of the younger tight ends I had to step up these last few weeks. I mean, yes, that's definitely going to help, but I would still just love if we can land one, if not two wide receivers. Last year we did it. We got Seth Anderson, Caleb Brown. Can we do it again? Can we get at least one more, not two? Switching the defense real quick then. For me, like when talking about like landing a transfer, it really depends on, okay, what guys leave. And what I mean by that is like linebacker, okay, if Jay Higgins leaves and if, the sounds of it, Nick Jackson, who knows if he's going to try to get the waiver. I'm just going to assume that's not going to work. But Jay Higgins, especially if he leaves, then yes, 100%, we're going to need to go in the transfer portal. Now, if he decides to stay and you have Kyler Fisher who could come back as well, he's a senior, he could potentially leave, but he could come back. Like at that point, then we probably don't need a transfer linebacker. And the same thing with the secondary. Like if Cooper Jean, Quinn Schulte, Castro, they all come back, and Jamari Harris, because he's a senior, if they all come back, then yes, you don't need a transfer at that position. But if one or two leave, then 100% we'll need at least a backup corner. So that's kind of where I'm at there with that. Defensive line, obviously we lose Joe Evans, we lose Logan Lee. But other than that, like I really like the starting four next year of Deontay Craig, Ethan Herkett, Yahweh Black, and Aaron Graves. Now, for me, maybe add another defensive lineman, maybe a D end in the portal. So for me, it's like with defense, it's more just like kind of a wait and see versus the offense where it's like, no, you for sure need to get a wide receiver. You probably need maybe one more O-line, for sure at least one or two wide receivers. Defense, it's more just like I kind of want to see who leaves first, and then at that point we could probably go from there.
Yeah. Yep. That's a good point. And I think, you never have enough corners. If we were somehow land a corner, you're not going to hear a complaint out of me. I think we mentioned that on this pod for what seems like a couple of years. Always having an extra corner. Guys get dinged. Even Cooper, like he hasn't stayed healthy technically for 2 straight years, for a full year. So, and what's your sense on Cooper? Do you think he goes, or do you think he stays?
I think he's playing. I think he's playing with everybody. Yeah,
I think he is too. Yeah,
but kind of, I feel like what you were gonna say is like, at first it was like no way he stays, and then it's like you're starting to get a little bit of hope lately, and that's kind of where I'm at too. Like at first I was like, no, he's off the NFL for sure. Lately, I'm feeling a little bit like I think it's like 70-30 at this point. 70%
he's gonna leave.
That he leaves. 30% he stays. But let's just say hypothetically he leaves, because I'm just gonna count. Something like that's too good to be true. You gotta see it to believe it. See it happen. Yeah. So let's just say hypothetically he leaves, but let's say Quinn Schulte and Jamari Harris decide to stay. So at that point, you have Jamari Harris, Deshaun Lee, the corners, and you have Quinn Schulte, Xavier, and then Sebastian. I don't know. I mean, like for him, and this is the same thing with like Jay Higgins. Like both of those guys had such good years. It's like how much better can you?
Yeah.
How much more can you improve your draft stock? Yes.
Yep.
So, man, I would love for them to stay as well. Now, if like Quinn Schulte decide to leave, like for example, we have Cohen Entringer, that one, he was a special teams player. He's going to be the next in line at safety. I have high hopes for him, so I'm not really too concerned there. But I would still, like I said, yeah, for sure, probably land at least one more corner in the portal, which I know we've been actually, and that's one more thing that I forgot to mention is I do know for sure that we have contacted some players in the portal. So it's not like we have not like even tried. Like there's been a couple
Yeah.
corners Iowa has. There has been a couple wide receivers. So that is that. But yeah, I mean, backup corner right now, TJ Hall, Devin Hilson, John Nestor. I mean, it's just very unproven players. That's another position where it's like I would love to get someone because, like you said, with injuries, things like that. And then, yeah, if Castro leaves, we need to find another cash position player. Now, I think if Quinn Schulte stays, and let's say Castro leaves, I think Cohen Entringer will then be the cash player because I think he has the physical makeup to be kind of a cash. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see there. For me, it's really like my concern level right now is at the linebacker position because if Jay Higgins leaves, Nick Jackson leaves, Kyle Fisher, like you're replacing all those players with new guys, and that's my concern right there. But if I really hope Jay Higgins stays. I really do at this point. Like just having at least one of the linebackers back from last year would be big. But defensive line should be really good. I'm a little concerned about the rotation on the defensive line just because the backups. I mean, we have Jeremiah Pittman, that Brian Allen, Max Llewellyn. But for me, it's a little concern on the back end of the defensive line. But starting four, man, like that's going to be a very good group.
Yep. And I mean, with Phil Parker, I mean, like he always seems to figure out a way to make these guys to utilize what we have, right? Whether it's, even if it doesn't seem like on paper they're very good, the defense always at the end of the year is always right up there. So like you said, my first and foremost concern is definitely the offense. And I agree. And like in today's day and age, Collin, we have to be active in the portal. Like this is the new age of college football where guys are looking for landing spots, and we can't just sit back and have other teams kind of, get guys that, maybe we're interested in coming here, but, we didn't all of a sudden be aggressive enough. Like we got to be aggressive in the portal. I'm not saying we have to go get 10 guys like some of these teams, but, let's try to fill some holes or potential holes, that we might need for next year.
Yeah, and for Iowa, I like and every year I want this to be the case is use the transfer portal to fill the holes that you need, and then obviously rely on what Iowa's always been, a developmental school on the other positions, and I love that you can work hand in hand. I thought last year we did as good of a job as you could possibly get. I mean, if you really think about it, the positions that we really needed, like Nick Jackson coming in, like he was huge. Wide receivers, obviously quarterback. Well, he got hurt, so that didn't really. But Eric All. I mean, we didn't really need a backup tight end, but still, just getting Eric All was huge. Like so, we definitely utilized it very good last year. Let's get into the OC for a little bit. Obviously, yesterday. I follow a lot of 24/7. David Eichel came out with a new article kind of going over the OC. He didn't name any names, but he did drop, Iowa is looking at external coaches, which in my opinion is such great news because I was so concerned that Kirk was going to stay internal, and right now it sounds like he's casting a wide net. He's looking around, which is huge. Obviously, the rumors of Scott Frost even getting a interview. Now, to me, I don't really necessarily would want Scott Frost from everything I've heard. I live in Lincoln. From some of the rumors I've heard about Scott Frost at his time here in Lincoln, and from what not David Eichel said, but it was actually the head of NIL. What he said was that Scott Frost, like he's not going to get that's not going to happen. But just getting the interview goes to show that hey, Kirk is looking around. He's not. This is something where he's actually kind of going outside his comfort zone, which I think is so big.
100%. I just don't want another guy that we hire in-house that is going to resemble what we just saw for the last 5 years with Brian. Like, I don't want that because then we're going to be saying the same things about that guy that we did Brian. And I'm not saying that still couldn't happen if we hire someone outside and, but we need a a breath of fresh air with this offense. We need a new voice in the locker room and in the meetings and in practice and in games. Like I think we need a spark. And if we can go out and get someone that, like you said, is proven, that has done a good job of calling plays and it's been successful, then I am all for that. Now, yeah, maybe I have my certain, preferences over an OC, like, somebody like a Paul Christ over a Scott Frost. Sure. But even like you said, even the fact that they're casting a wide net of a variety of different names and OCs is a great thing, because I was so afraid that we are just going to hire John Budemeyer, who has done, I don't even know what, but in my opinion, deserves to not have a job at Iowa, because just like Brian, he's responsible for the offense. So I don't know.
Well,
That's what I was afraid of.
He was an analyst these last 2 years and really focused on the quarterback position, and
which we've been terrible at.
Exactly. So it's like, okay, well, what have I seen that has improved ever since he's been here?
Correct. And what would give me any sort of confidence that I could see or have in him to call plays? Like, no. So let's go get someone that actually has been an offensive coordinator before.
Exactly. So that's for me, like 100% a thing. Someone asked in, like, David Eichel in that, like, message board, they're like, okay, so what's the percentage? Because David Eichel said it's been a mixture of NFL guys, like analysts, things like that, position coaches, whatever, former head coaches, and then other like position coaches and things like that. And he put NFL 60%, head coaching 15%, and other 25% in terms of the amount of that have been kind of contacted or that he's heard. So it really sounds like Kirk is kind of fishing around the NFL, which I don't mind at all. Find someone that has done a good job in the NFL, because once again, I keep saying it for forever, that NFL runs similar things to Iowa, but they just do it more in a modern 21st century like scheme that I've always said Iowa needs to get to. I don't want Iowa to change to a spread, because I just don't think that's just not who Iowa is, the players, whatever. But get to a point where you can take what you're doing, pro style, run first type of team, and apply it to a more modern offense, and good things will happen. And so some other guys that have been floating around that I've heard is Clint Kubiak, which you've probably heard of him because he was OC at Vikings, but right now he's the passing game coordinator for the 49ers. So, like, I wouldn't mind that. Andy Ludwig, which is the offensive coordinator for Utah, which someone brought up a good point in the message boards. I looked it up myself, but there was a private flight from Salt Lake City to Cedar Rapids today. So who knows? But that's another name that has been thrown around. I wouldn't mind that at all, because if you think about Utah, once again, you talk about it.
They're a program that doesn't get the best talent, but it always seems like, man, they know how to win games. They're tough, they're physical, and they're actually good on offense.
Yep, exactly.
And what I was going to say to add on to that, and even like what I feel like Utah does, they utilize, like, they create an offense that their players know how to, like, execute. Like, they tailor to the actual players. It's not just like, this is the way it's going to be. It's not like, we're going to run this system even though you guys really aren't suited for it. Like, I feel like they really, like, they run an offense that, their players are good at running. So I don't know. I think that's, for me, the most important thing when I get an offense, when I see who the OC is. Like, hopefully they're able to kind of, tailor the offense to what we actually have on the field.
And then Paul Chris is the other one, which we talked about Paul Chris. I mean, I've heard his name floating around a little bit, and we kind of went into him a couple podcasts ago about what he could bring to the table. I think a lot of people kind of think of Paul Chris and his tenure at Wisconsin as a head coach and how it kind of didn't end very well. But you go back and look at what he did as offensive coordinator for them, and I think a lot of people would be happy about that. But whoever it is, I'm just happy that Kirk is going out of his comfort zone and he's looking outside. And I just hope whoever it ends up being, it's someone that has decent experience, that has ran another one that I've heard too, but I think this is just people talking about him, would be Bill O'Brien. He was obviously offensive coordinator for Alabama the last few years. He is the offensive coordinator now, which they're not very good, but the Patriots. But he did really good at Penn State. He was at Alabama. So, like, that's another one that people were talking about. But just anybody that, like I said, has experience, that's done a decent job, that, you know, for me, like, maybe he's been to NFL and college, kind of back, you know, I would love that. I don't want someone like yours, the John Boudmeyer, where it's like he's been at like one program. He was at Colorado State for a year. Like, that doesn't get me excited at all.
No. And like you said, just in general, the internal hire, like, we have seen what the internal hire looks like. I don't want to see this. This offense needs to be better. And just, I seriously think just a new face as an OC could actually just even get players to like buy in more and play harder for them. And like, I don't know. And potentially land some actual good transfers, you know?
Yeah, because
like
if you could
that's
get
a real thing.
Yeah. Think about, like, if you got, and it's just, for example, like Andy Ludwig, Utah, you could possibly snag some of those players too. Like, if
you could maybe get a Utah player to come, 100%,
wide receiver, somebody.
A tight end.
I honestly, like, I would
100%.
not mind, like, if there was a list of coaches like I could choose from, he would definitely be on top of my. I don't know if he would be the very top, but he would be up there because of just what Utah has done with the similar type of offense. And now I will admit, like, obviously the Pac-12 defensively, their defenses are not as good compared to the Big Ten. So, like, you know, Utah, you know, are going up against defenses in the Pac-12 that are not the best compared to the Big Ten. But still, I still think he would do a really good job.
And I think, and this is just off the top of my head, but like, I think the Utah thing makes a lot of sense because Kyle Whittingham, head coach for Utah, is just like Kirk, a very tenured guy. And I'm sure there's a lot of mutual respect between the two. And I'm sure that's where Kirk's looking, right? A guy that's super successful at Utah, who doesn't maybe get the best talent, but, you know, really known for like developing and a very, stable program, always in the mix. Right.
Yep.
And so I'm sure that makes a lot of sense. I would love that too. Yeah.
And then let's talk a little bit about this whole, practice thing with, I think it was
the Joey Labus practice film.
Oh, it was two guys named Chris that were talking about it. And so I watched that. I also watched Deontay Vines's, and I guess I want to hear your thoughts first, and I'll get into what I kind of think about it all.
Well, we've talked a little bit about it, and I think, so my initial reaction, I was like so mad, right? I was like, you're kidding me. This guy is throwing bombs down the field, and these wide receivers are going up and getting it, and scoring touchdowns in practice. And all we hear, and at least the rumor is that Joey Labus just isn't very good in practice. And that film would contradict that theory. So at first I was like, man, this is like, what are we doing? Like, did Joey, like, I don't know what he did, but is he just in the doghouse? Like, does Kirk just will not start him no matter what? Because maybe he doesn't like him. I don't know. Because in practice, the film is showing that he actually can throw the ball deep and accurate and all that. But I talked to you a little bit, and, you know, that was my, first initial emotional reaction. And I think you were the one to say, hey, you're like, well, okay, first of all, like, we don't know, like, what the exact, what they're exactly doing in practice. Like, is this just like practicing the deep ball? Is this just like a random play? Is this one good throw out of 20 bad throws? Like, we don't know all that. And so I do take that into account too, but it was really interesting to see that film come out. Cause I mean, that's like what us fans have been looking for since Cade got injured.
Yeah, kind of what I based it off of is, okay, you think about between spring ball, fall camp, and then obviously practice during the season. It's a lot of hours of practice. And so you have all those hours of practice, and then you have a 2-minute highlight video. Yes, if you are a quarterback that is practicing that much in a given year, you should have at least 2 minutes of highlights of good throws, like anybody, and so that's kind of where and that's kind of what I said to you the other night of, that was like my first initial thing was, yes, for me, it's more like, why do we throw so vertical in practice? Now, once again, that kind of contradicts to what I just said, because once again, maybe those highlights are the only one times when we actually do that type of stuff. But still, like watching that, it's like we throw so vertically in practice, yet during games, it's like we completely shy away from that. Now, a little bit has to do with, yes, I get the practice. You know, it's not as much pressure. You don't. It's not game situation. Like I get all that, but man, like, why do we do it so much in practice, and then you get to the game and it's like completely, just gone. So that was my thing too. And then like going back to Labus, my theory on Labus is this: that obviously last year he started the bowl game and he knew Cade was coming in, so he knew he was going to be a backup. But I think he probably figured he was going to be the second stringer because, you know, he started in the bowl game, he got his minutes, things like that. And then, you know, we bring in Deacon Hill, but even at that, it's like, okay, he's a transfer guy. He hasn't been in the program for very long. Like, he's never going to be, like, ahead of me, whatever. And then, you know, Labus gets hurt during, I don't know if it was summer conditioning or fall camp, out for a few weeks. And then all of a sudden, Hill jumps him, but not only jumps him, but then someone asked Ferentz at the beginning of the year about, like, who's the backup. And he kind of mentioned something about, like, clear-cut backup is Deacon. And I'm sure that really kind of got to Labus, like, okay, like I've been here for multiple years. I started in a bowl game. I won the bowl game. Now, granted, the defense played lights out, but I won the bowl game. And this guy that just came in, that was going to go to Fordham, is going to be ahead of me. And then I really just think as the rest of the year, he kind of just coasted, right? Probably didn't give it his all. Now he probably went through the motions a little bit. It's almost like kind of like I was trying to think of an analogy. It's like going on vacation from Tuesday to Sunday. Well, that Monday before you go on vacation, you might go to work and you might be at work, but you're not going to give it your all because you're just, you know, you're kind of coasting through the day because you just want to get done because all you can think about is vacation. So like it's kind of how I think about this, where like he was probably at every practice, right? He was there, he went through the motions, and so at that point, I'm sure the coaches were just kind of over him because he probably wasn't giving it his all. So that's my theory. Now, who knows if that was right or if that's anywhere close to, but I just, because I can't think of any other situation why they wouldn't at least try him one game, especially after watching him in the bowl game where he wasn't that bad. So my theory is that he kind of just kind of gave up when all that happened, and coaches was like, well, you know, if you're not really trying very hard, why would we put you in? So that's kind of what I thought.
And I think it goes both ways. I mean, I 100% think that that's the truth. But I mean, if you like, and you said, like, if you're Joey, and I'm not going to defend if that's actually what's happening, and he doesn't really, you know, he's kind of essentially quote unquote given up, then that's one thing. But I mean, if he's still trying to, you know, participate and still trying to do a good job in practice, and like to not even get a chance at all this year with the way our offense, where it got to with Deacon Hill, is crazy to me. Because I mean, like he had a game where he had like 6 pass completions or something, like 30% passing one game, like less than 60 yard. I mean, you can't tell me, like, if Joey doesn't get in, then why it's hard to probably show up for practice.
Exactly.
So I'm sure it goes both ways, and I think it's just it's not a surprise that Joey's moving on. I think it's best for everyone, right? I think it's best for Joey. You know, try to go compete somewhere where you can actually get some playing time. So
yeah, for sure. And so with that being said, then, and obviously with Devontae Vines, just to kind of wrap up, that is my biggest takeaway, like I said, between that Devontae Vines and that was just, holy shit. Like, yeah, it's like, why can't the practices be like the games where we're throwing?
I didn't even think of that. And so that's a great point. It's like, if we're going to do that stuff in practice, can we actually, you know, have that translate to actual games, please? Can we start running some deeper routes and actually attempting to throw it downfield? I agree.
Yeah. Just like literally just a couple seconds ago, Brad actually texted me, and this is very random, but Brad texted me that Ohio State transfer Kyle McCord is moving on from Nebraska. The former Buckeye signal will keep his transfer portal recruitment open, so it doesn't sound like he's going to Nebraska now, even though like he took a visit and every Nebraska fan thought they were getting him. Sounds like there's been a report that he's moving on from them, which is kind of funny.
Hold out hope for what's his name, Dylan Rail.
Well, and I do think he will go, and maybe he'll start right away. Who knows? But that is kind of funny though, because everybody. I mean, I live in Lincoln, so I mean, everybody was like so happy these last few days. Oh, getting Kyle McCord. Which I try to tell them, like, yes, I would take him in a heartbeat too, but let's also remember this dude was throwing balls to arguably one of the best wide receivers ever in Marvin Harrison, and also then the other guy, I always forget his name, but he's gonna be a top, first round draft pick as well. Yeah. So it's like, it's not gonna be very.
The running backs are good. Like, it's like one of the best offensive lines in the Big Ten. It's like, come on. I agree. If you're, and he didn't have that great of a year in Ohio State standards, right? And then obviously they lose to Michigan. So I agree. It's like, I mean, what makes me think even if Nebraska got him, that he was going to be like this next big thing at Nebraska? Like, I don't know. You're taking a way less talent, and you already didn't do, great at Ohio State. You won, but there's a variety of reasons why you won. It's not just all him. So,
yep. Okay, before we end, and people that aren't, maybe into basketball, we're going to spend like 5 minutes or less. You can end the podcast now, because I know some people are here just, for football. But I do just want to bring up basketball for just a complete second, because it is very, very embarrassing this last week of Iowa basketball. I mean, the Purdue game is understandable. I mean, they were coming off a loss at Northwestern. You almost figured that we were going to get blown out. We always do at Purdue. But then you get blown out, and that should be a wake-up call. That should get you back, okay, let's figure it out. You go to Iowa State, and I get Iowa State's a tough place to play, but Iowa State isn't they're a good team, but they're not a Purdue level, and we get absolutely blown out, probably even worse than the Purdue game.
100%.
And then it's like, okay, well, whatever. You lose two big games, whatever, you lose. And then you go at home, should be a win, should be an easy win. You're playing a Michigan team that's not good at all. And you're at home, and you get completely embarrassed in that game in the second half. And I just my point here, and this is what I just want to make, I just think this year it's okay to have. We've been pretty good the last couple of years. I can't complain. I just think this year we have no alpha. Like last year we had Chris Murray. Now everybody got on Chris Murray. But if he wasn't Keegan's brother, like we would have appreciated him a lot more, because he was still really good. I just think that when he had that off night, everybody compared him to Keegan Murray. It's like, hey, he's not quite Keegan Murray, but he's still really good. So you had him last year. You had Keegan Murray 2 years ago. You had Garza for 2 years. Before Garza, you had Wieskamp and you had Bohannon. Well, and you also had Garza in that time period too. Then you had, Uthoff. You had Peter Jock, like Devin Marble. This year we just don't have that dude, Aaron White, for 2015. We just don't have a dude that is just every game you know that they're going to do good things. Now you can maybe make the case Ben Krikke, but no, like we just don't. And I think that's a problem that this team has. And then obviously another problem is defense is absolutely horrible. Might be, every year it's bad. This might be the worst team defensively, getting rebounds and then also defense. Ben Krikke should not be a center. He should be playing power forward for us. That was the biggest thing this year that we missed on, was not getting a dominant center. Now, it doesn't have to necessarily be a guy that's good offensively, but get a dominant center.
Yeah.
And we didn't get that, and so we have to force Ben Krikke, who is a power forward, to play center in the Big Ten. Yeah, it's not going to be good defensively. So that's just my thoughts. Yeah, and our guard play is not good either. No. I'm sorry, but Tony Perkins, who's a senior, should be consistently a lot better than 100%. He is, and he's not. And
and it seems like Sanford, if he can't hit a three, he's sort of useless in a sense, right? The thing that drives me crazy is how are we so competitive against like a team like Creighton, who I think is better than Iowa State. Now, I'm not saying they're better than Purdue, but they're on that level, right? They're on that level. And I get it. It's a big, like Purdue's a Big Ten team. We never do good at Purdue. And I'm not suggesting that we were supposed to beat them or anything like that. But then you're right. We go to Hilton. Dude, I watched 5 minutes of that game. We could barely get the ball over half court.
Yeah, I kept
Like,
turning the ball over.
We don't have a guy that I feel like it can handle the ball in pressure situations. Number one, you'd think Tony would be that guy, but I didn't see it in that game. And then number two, it's like we were not competitive at all. And really both of those two games at any point.
No.
And then
it was over within the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, it was. And then you followed up with a 10-point loss at home against Michigan, where the reports are Juwan Howard's like out at head coach. It's like, okay, guys, and that's
is that true? By the way,
I is it not true?
I don't know. I have no idea. There's been nothing really more about that.
I just saw it on Twitter, so take with that what you will. Because Twitter's always 100%. I just saw the report. I was like, the reports are Juwan could be out now. Again, they're what, a 500 team or something like that in the Big Ten. They're not very good, Michigan, this year.
They were 4-5 going into the Iowa game, so no.
Yeah, so they're 5-5. So no, we're both like a 5-5 team, and we lost by 10 at home to them.
And we were down by 20 at one point.
Yeah, again, really not competitive, and so I don't know what's going on. 100%. I think defense is always an issue, but man, this year it's like. I seriously think we've been struggling offensively, consistently for the last couple of games, and it's really exposing the defense because I just feel like you mentioned, Chris or Keegan or Luka can make up for some of that. They could answer back, and we could get in some of these shootout games. Well, it's like we're not able to do that right now. We don't have a guy that can be consistent on offense. So it's really hurting our defense. And
our 3-point shooting this year is not good either. It's so horrible. Bad. And so, when you don't have that, you just 100%. Offensively, and going back to what you said, you're surprised, the Crane game. But that game was a one game this year where we actually shot the ball pretty good. Remember when Kirk was making every jumper? That's the only reason why we stayed in that game.
Yeah.
But every other game we are against the good teams. I mean, I'm not really necessarily talking about the bad teams. We have not shot the ball good. And so, yes, we're so bad on defense and that's what sucks with under Fran. And this is going to the tournament too, is it's a guaranteed defense is going to be bad. So you need the offense to do good. And when the offense is bad, then it's game over because it's the defense can never step up. I don't know why.
And then Fran's getting tossed, and
it's just.
I mean, there's just it's just so bad right now.
This is when the philosophy under Fran for defense just must not be a important thing because he's been here for now 12, 13 years. You would think at least one roster would have be good on defense, and we have never been good at defense under Fran. That's when it's kind of an afterthought. And for me, I think my theory is. We're so fast in offense, we run it up and down the field. We try to score really quick that we get so tired that defense is just, because we're constantly trying to push it offensively, which isn't a bad thing, right? But we don't really play much half court offense. We're trying to push the pace as fast as possible. I think that.
Yeah, I think teams are trying to get us into that situation because we're obviously not very good at it. If we're not out in transition, I feel like we're not going to be that great offensively. I mean, that, like you said, hitting threes. I mean, there's not many teams that live and die by the three more than Iowa. And obviously we've seen us die more often than live this year. And that's why we're 5-5. So
I'm just excited we have the women's basketball team to get us through the winter because men's basketball is definitely not going to at this point. Yep. And I'm so pumped. I get to watch Caitlin Clark for the first time in person this weekend in Des Moines. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited to watch her, and I guess I'll watch the men's team as well, but I'm more looking forward to the women's game. Who would have ever thought that those words would come out of my mouth? But here we are, and I mean, honestly though, the women's team, they're so much fun to watch, and I'll probably, especially when we get into Big Ten play, January, February, hell yeah, I'll be watching almost every single game for women's.
We were into it last year, man, and
it was fun.
It was so much fun.
Can't take it for granted because Caitlin's not going to be here forever. So
I'm trying to go to a game with you this year too, potentially.
Yeah,
later on, maybe
that's the hope. So. And sometime in January, February, we can get to a game in Iowa City because I do want to go to a game in Iowa City and see what the difference is because from what I've heard is Carver's like with especially now with Caitlin Clark, like it's so much better than like the men's games.
Oh my God. Well, it's packed, first of all.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, it's sold out. And then number two, like, oh my God, like they're actually like consistently cheering every time. Yeah, I can only imagine.
So
before we end it, I was gonna say real quick. I was gonna maybe mention at the beginning, but I'll mention it here just real quick. One of my buddies, shout out Blake if he's still listening. I doubt it since we switched to Iowa basketball. But
we'll know if he does because he'll text us or not.
Yeah. Yep, he's an avid listener of the pod, and so I just kind of wanted to shout him out because he had texted me and you and was just like giving us a little bit of feedback about our pod and was just like, man, I'm because he's a truck driver, he hauls feed for a feed company back at home, and he's just like, man, every time Collin talks I gotta freaking turn my radio way down because his mic is so close, and it seems like, Tyler, your mic is so far away, so it's much quieter, so then I gotta turn it back up. Moral of the story, or point being, that obviously appreciate the feedback. I'm going to try to sit closer to my mic so that he doesn't have to constantly do that. And I'm sure it's been an issue not only for him, but some other people that maybe listen to us on the road as well. So just wanted to say, like, yeah, if you guys ever have questions, comments, or concerns, shoot them our way. Leave a comment on our YouTube, or we do have a Twitter. You can always DM us. So we always want to try to make the pod better for you guys. And yeah, just wanted to shout him out. He's an avid listener, and I'll give him his props here. So
Blake might be our number one supporter. I know some other guys that listen to everyone. So
yeah.
So thank you guys all for that. And yes, Thank you, Blake. I'm glad you said that, because I would have forgot to mention that he did say that. We were actually playing Xbox when he told us that, by the way.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. But yep, that will do it for this episode. Thank you guys all for listening. And like you said, like, leave reviews, good or bad. I mean, even the bad parts, like, it'd be nice, take some criticism. I mean, it's the only way you can improve something. So
right.
We are open to that. But yeah, we are going to end it on that. We'll take a week off. I'm going to be gone next week, and we just won't have time.
You'll be living life up in New York City.
Yep, going to New York for a few days. Be back on Wednesday night, but by then it's Thursday. Then you have Christmas. So what our plan is the week of Christmas week. So probably that Wednesday, which would be like the 27th, we'll probably do another episode, and that will go over the bowl game. And then, at that point, then we get into kind of the off season, and probably January we'll have a few episodes out, because by then the OC will probably be hired. We'll know some other stuff. So that's kind of the plan for right now, but we'll try to keep it consistent during the offseason. We won't have one out every week, but maybe like twice a month we'll do an episode or something like that is kind of what I was thinking. And then, like, you get into like February, March, maybe not this year because the men's team is horrible, but like even like talking little women's basketball with some of the football stuff that we have. So we'll get into all that. So, I mean, hopefully the men's team turns around. I mean, it does seem like we always start slow. I mean, remember last year at this time, we were not very good either, and we found a way, but we
had a quad 4 loss. I didn't think it'd be much worse.
And we lost to Nebraska. We lost to Duke. We lost to Wisconsin. And so, like, we were not looking very good either, and we've turned it around. But the reason why I have my doubts this year is because we don't have like a Chris Murray. Last year we did. But who knows? Maybe they'll turn around, and maybe they'll end up being decent. Now, I will say the Big Ten is not as good this year. I mean, you have Purdue, you have Illinois, but outside of that, you have a bunch of teams like Michigan State, who was number 4th in the country to start the year, isn't even ranked. They lost to Nebraska. They have like 4 or 5 losses. So anything can happen. But all right, well, that will do it for this episode. We'll be back in a couple weeks. Until then, have a Merry Christmas and go Hawks.
That's right. Merry Christmas. Go Hawks.